First of all, thank you for attending my presentation. Before I get started, I know this is more geared towards Asterisk. How many of you have heard of Switchvox? All of you, good. So that's good. So you know Switchvox is just our turnkey product that we've developed off of Asterisk. And it is a closed system, but it is something that we sell and support. But thank you, that's good that you know what that is. My name's Steve Jacob. I'm the channel sales engineer for Digium. I've been there for about 8 years. You can think of me as pre-sales assistant. So if you ever need help with anything, there's my contact information. Feel free to give me a call or shout out to me, and I can help you with your Switchvox question. So what we're going to talk about here for the next hour or so is building IVRs, interactive voice response systems. And I'm assuming you know what that is, so today's presentation is more how you would build that with Switchvox. So I'm going to go through and actually build an IVR. We're going to talk about how that works with Switchvox. I'm going to show you that. What we're going to do is we're going to go through, I'm going to give you some tips when you plan your IVR, some tips when you build your IVR. Then I'm actually going to show you an example flowchart and why that's important in the Switchvox. And you'll see that when we start to build it. And then we're going to build the IVR in Switchvox. I'm going to actually build it. So it's not just a PowerPoint presentation. We're going to dive into a live system. We're going to build an IVR. I've got some phones registered up here. I actually got a DID so you can call in and we can play. And then I'll reserve some time at the end for questions and answers. And if you have any questions as I go along, feel free to ask. We don't have to wait towards the end. Just ask as we go. I appreciate when you ask questions. It's not going to bother me at all to ask the questions as we proceed. So one of the first things is before you build your IVR, think about what you want to say in your IVR. So when I say promote your business in your IVR, it doesn't have to be boring. Press 1 for sales, 2 for support. Go ahead and promote your industry, your business. Feel free to talk about what you're going to say. Now, I wouldn't get too wordy because kind of bullet point number 2 is you don't want to have a really long IVR. You want to be respectful of the customers calling in. We've all called in to IVRs, and the menu structure is so long, you seem like you're in there forever trying to punch around. But promote your business, but if you've got more detailed information that you want to talk about, just remember there's queue extensions and there's going to be holding spots where you'll be able to say more while they're waiting in the queues and in parking lots and things like that. Also avoid cliches. You know, again, to me, that's kind of just wasting time. Hey, listen to all the options before you make your selection, or we know your time is valuable. You know, it's like, really? Come on, let's get to where we're going because I want to be able to make my selection. I want to talk to someone. But you hear that on a lot of IVRs. Also, you might want to limit your options to 5 or less. Again, you don't want to have a really long menu structure. And I would also limit your submenus to about 3. Now, you have to do what you have to do, but just try to think about, not making, 9, 10 different options there for people to choose. And then when you do build your IVR, put your most frequently chosen option at the top. It's like, all right, the one they call the most is option number 5. They don't want to wait. So put that up top. And then tips when you build your IVR. To me, the most important feature or tip that I can give you as far as building IVRs with Switchvox is to build a flowchart. Now that might sound a little funny at the moment, but you'll see once we get into building the IVR, you'll see why you'll need this. And really, bullet point number 2, the reason you need the flowchart is because when you build Switchvox, an IVR in Switchvox, you're going to build that from the bottom up. I kind of relate it to building a house. You don't start with the ceiling and then the walls and then the foundation. You build your foundation, the walls, and then the ceiling. So you kind of build from the bottom up. And when you build this, you'll see it's kind of hard to think about the end point and then work your way backwards. So you're going to need some type of instructions or flow that you can follow. Also, build all your components that you're going to need up front. And this will just help you move faster. It'll make you more efficient. So build your prompts, your time frames, your extensions, and any other component. Go ahead and get those out of the way. So that way, when you need those, when you call upon a time frame, it's there, it's ready to be used. When you're creating your sound prompts, when I say it's best to keep consistent, what I'm talking about there is don't have 3 or 4 different people recording prompts. Usually, most people will sit down with one person to record those, and that's what they'll do. We actually use Allison Smith, who does the sound prompts in our system. We actually have people that will, hire her and let her, you can send her a prompt through her email or through her website, and she will record these for you. She has her own business, and actually I had invited her. She is at the conference this week, but she's not flying in until later this afternoon, so I was hoping to get a cameo with her in here. But so if you really want to be consistent, you can have her record your prompts. Also, I'm going to show you how to record your prompts with the system, and when you do, we've called into IVRs. You've heard where it sounds like people have recorded from the speakerphone. So you either want to use a mic or the handset. So you just want to make sure that the sound quality is the best there. And then just another kind of tip for Switchvox is you'll see when we record this, maybe hesitate just a split second. And the reason I say that is when it says record after the beep and you start recording, sometimes when you go to play that prompt, it might get clipped in the beginning. There are ways, even if you do that, there are ways to add timers on the front end to not have that. But again, just trying to throw out some tips that I've run across as I've built IVRs. And here's Allison. I just wanted to give her a shout out, and I want to thank her she actually created some prompts for me because she couldn't be here. She said, hey, send me your prompts and I will build those for you. So I just wanted to give her a shout out and thank her. So here's a sample flow chart. Now we say IVR, you may have heard of auto attendance, and we like to think of this as more than an auto attendant, because there's a lot of things that you can do here. So in this flow chart, and the reason I say it's important, one, you can see, again, my brain wants to work from top to bottom, so I'll lay everything out. But the other thing that I use my flow chart, everything in red, when I look here, it tells me all those components that I need to build in advance. Things like variables, time frames, sound prompts, queues, mailboxes, extensions, queue extensions. I need all that stuff. I need to build that because when I build my IVR, I'm going to reach out and say, hey, I need a time-based clause because I want to check to see what time this call is and make a decision whether we're open or closed so I can send it to the right branch. And I can't do that if it doesn't exist. So you can kind of use that as your grocery list of the things that you need. And then same flow chart, and the only thing I'm showing here is, again, in red is the sequence that I would build this. So again, I would start at the bottom. I would build my minor or my sub IVRs and work my way back. To me, it's kind of like 7 and 9 is where it really starts to get more involved. So when I get up to IVR number 7, I've got my sound prompts, but also in these boxes, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 9, those are my options. So I have to have those options. When I say press 0 for the operator, well, I need to have an operator extension. Or 1 for sales, I need that queue. So this is how I use my flow chart. So kind of take a mental image of this. It'd been nice if I had 2 screens so I could leave the flow chart up there. But now I'm going to dive in and actually show you what it looks like in Switchvox. Now Switchvox is browser-based, so there's no client software. You just load just whatever you use, Chrome, Firefox, whatever browser you want to use, just browse to that, open it up. This is the admin interface. There's 3 interfaces. There's the admin interface here, there's a user interface, and the switchboard. And there's another session following this one that will actually dive into the switchboard and get into user side and switchboard. But right here, for the IVRs, I'm going to go under Tools and IVR Editor. And we'll just show there's an example IVR that's in here. So we'll kind of go through I want to show you what the components look like. I mean, all the actions and options of the IVR. So basically, there's 3 sections. The first one's just where you're going to give it a name. But the main 2 pieces are actions and options. So let's take a look at some of the actions here. So you can do things like play and record sounds, send your information to an email, voicemail, record it into the sound manager. And I'll give you some examples how some of this stuff is used. One of my resellers approached me a few years ago, and they ran across a company that refilled prescription drugs. So when he called, he said, "Hey, does your IVR do like an interview process?" I'm thinking, I'd never been asked that, wasn't sure what he meant. I said, "What do you mean, an interview process?" He said, "Well," he said, "I want to ask one question at a time, get the answer, and then save that, and then in the end, merge all that information together and then send it off as an email or to voicemail." The problem the current customer had, their phone system could only have one sound prompt and one recording. So when they asked for all the information, what's your first name, your last name, your doctor's name, your prescription number, where do you get your prescriptions refilled, what's the address, the phone number, they had all this information, and you could kind of see when you asked different people that same information, it wasn't in the same order, or they forgot to give some of the information. So the people, the agents that were having to take those calls and do something with that information, it was slowing them down because they would always have to try to figure out what was going on. So I said, I don't know, let's take a look. I said, all you're asking is to play a sound when you ask a question, record that information, and then in the end, send it to voicemail and email it. And really in that first section, I could do everything he asked. And actually, he's at our advisory council meeting right now, and I just talked to him earlier, and he said he's still selling the same IVR to other companies just like that one. So that's an example how the IVRs can be used. You'll see here, even like the play sound, it gives a brief description on the front level. I always like to dive in a little deeper to see what this gives me. So when you want to play a sound, there's a built-in sound manager, which I'll take you to in a little bit. You can pick your folder where your sound prompts are recorded, and then from there you can go and choose what sound prompts you want to play, and then you have options to say, is the sound interruptible? It might be a common IVR where customers come back. You don't want them, again, you want to be respectful of their time. You don't want them to have to go through all that menu structure. You can say, make this sound interruptible, and if they know they're going to 2 for support, they can just hit 2 and go there. Some other things are conditional clauses, and I'll show you this because this is part of the flow chart that I showed you at the top. Now, I didn't point it out, but one of the first decisions I was going to make in my IVR was like what we call day-night mode or a manual override. Pretty common to have your business hours open closed, but let's say there's bad weather, or my theme today is the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe they win the Super Bowl, and we're going to celebrate tomorrow because they've won the Super Bowl, so we're going to do a manual close. Well, you can actually do things and create variables and make decisions based off that variable. So this is one action that you can do. We also have time-based clauses where you can check the time of day. Are we open? Are we closed? We'll use this in our IVR. Now this alter caller ID, this is something I like, and we use this in-house at Digium. And what's nice about this is, as you get incoming calls, you can pre-pend or pend or even replace all the information like caller ID, name, and or number. And where this is helpful, like what we do in-house, is based off of what selections you choose. Let's say that you're an agent, you're in multiple queues. And again, I want to stick with our examples. It's the Arizona Cardinals. We have a ticket office. We have a front office. We have apparel where you want to buy jerseys and stuff. Let's say it's the same person answering those calls, but they kind of want a heads up. Is this the ticket, is this person wanting to talk about tickets? Are they wanting to talk about clothing, apparel? So I can come in here and prepend, I can prepend some information. So when you come in, it's like, this person selected the ticket option. So they're going to, while the phone's ringing, this is displayed on your switchboard, it's displayed on your phone, it prepends that to the caller name. So this way, maybe if I was going to pull up a screen, I might go, while the phone's ringing, I'll bring up my ticket screen, because I know that's what they're going to talk about. So to me, this could help make your agent or whoever's taking this call more productive, because they're going to be ready to take this call versus, hey, how may I help you today? What are you looking for? Start talking, hey, I want to buy tickets. Well, you already know that they selected the ticket option, so you can, that can save you some time. And that's real helpful, especially if you've been in multiple queues and stuff. I'm not going to cover everything. I'm just going to kind of hop around here. You can dial extensions, send a voicemail, send an external number. So let's say maybe you have an after-hours tech that are on call. You can go through the menu, and it's like, hey, this is an emergency. I want to reach the after-hour tech. Press 3. You go there, and then here it dials the number for that tech. So you can do things like that. Recording digits. And I also have here in my IVR example where we're going to enter an account number and get a balance. So if you need that, you can record the digits. Maybe the digits are a password. There's a lot of ways you can use that. I mentioned variables, so I can set variables in this, again, back to my day-night mode. 0 might be closed, 1 might be open, so I can do a manual override. So I have those to use. And then send call values to a URL. This is where, this is where I think we really make the IVR really powerful. And it's much more than an auto attendant, because, so far, and most people are going to say press 1 for this, 2 for that. But what this option or action allows you to do is actually capture some information, send it off to a web application, to a web server, and then pull back some information. I can receive up to 8 pieces of information back from this application. So you might have someone that, again, enters account number. Maybe they want their balance. Had a customer in Tennessee. They wrote software. What they did, instead of going through the menu structure and asking, sales, support, accounting, or products, instead of asking all the questions and having the customer select what they want, they just said, enter your account number. And then from there, they looked up who the customer was. They wrote different types of software packages. They looked up what package that customer bought. They responded back with the extension of the queue that was of the engineers that supported that product, and then they sent the call to that extension. So that way the customer, again, they were being respectful of the customer's time. They weren't waiting to the customer to select all these different options. They took their account number, they looked up and said, that's version 1 software, that's supported by these engineers, let's ring their phone. So that's one way you can use this. And like I said, there's people that use it to check balances and other things like that. So this is a really powerful action that can be used. Oops, wrong one. And then the last thing I'll touch on here as far as actions, the distinctive ring hints. You can think of this as a variable that's going to be used by your phone. So I've already mentioned that we had a way to alter caller ID name and number as it comes in. We can also have a way to ring your phones different. So it might be that if someone selected tickets, your phone rings one way. If it rings another, if they select apparel, it rings a different way. So you set variables here. So when the call passes through this, it gets set for whatever you type in here. So I'll just show you here. So I might say again, this is tickets. So now when the call passes through this action, The ring hint will be set for tickets, and then when I get to the phone itself has options to allow you to say, hey, if ring hint equals tickets, then you select your ringtone. If it's equal to apparel, you get to select a different ringtone. So this is just another way to kind of tip off your agent who's taking the calls what type of call this is going to be before they get there. This is where you hum the Jeopardy tune. So that's actions. So now let's take a look at options. So what happens when you press 0 for the front office or 1 for ticket sales or 2? So the way this works is, again, you want things to be available when you want to choose them. So if I come to, I just click the button and say create options. And I could say 5, maybe that's sales. So because it's already exists, I select the option, I select the IVR menu that I want to go to, and select that. So you'll see the interface is real easy to use. It makes it nice to tie all these together. Other things under options, a lot of times, the first one up there, a lot of times you'll hear, hey, if you know your party's extension, dial it now. Well, we have the option of allowing that to happen or not to happen. You can create groups. Sometimes people might want you to be able to call everybody but the executive team. So you might create a group and omit the executive team so that way they have to go through the administrative assistants. And then by default, the next two, you can pretty much leave these as is. The next section here, it's what happens if you say press 1, 2, or 3. They keep hitting 4, 5, and 6. It just says, hey, I'm sorry, wrong. It's invalid. Try again. And it loops back around. And the next one is the one I'm guilty of. This is a timeout. I'll get into an IVR and I'll start wandering. I'm like the dog in Up. I'll start looking out the window. I'll get distracted, squirrel. And I'll start looking out the window and forget that I'm in the IVR. So this option's in there for me. So after 10 seconds, it says, hey, wake up, you need to select something. And then the last section here is how many times am I going to allow Steve to stare out the window before I hang up on him? But this is all configurable. I wouldn't hang up on someone. I would probably reduce that number from 6 and then send them somewhere where they can actually be helped by someone. But again, you can see that the interface is real easy. So now I want to go back and actually build the IVR. So I'm going to give us another quick look here. Take a peek at the flowchart so when I dive in, you can actually see what I'm doing here. So I've got at the bottom, we're going to call like the front office of the operator. I'm going to build a couple queues. I've got 3 for account information, name directories, a couple prompts, and then variables and time-based clauses. So we'll. So when I said I use the IVR to build things, so let's just take a look at the sound manager. So I know I need to build a couple prompts there. So the sound manager is built in. And what I like to do sometimes is create my own folder. Let's look at the folders. I like to create my own folders. You can see there's a long list of system folders here. And if I were to create my own sound prompts, they might get mixed in with some of these. So you can see at the bottom, I have a user folder. So when I upload or record a sound, that's where that goes. If I want to create a sound, I go to the top right corner, hit go. So you can name it. Maybe. It doesn't like it. There you go. You have a script box here, so this is nice where you can actually type out what that sound prompt might be. You know, thank you for calling the Arizona Cardinals organization. So that way, when you do record your message, you can actually read that from the telephone. So I won't type the whole thing here, but just we'll pretend. I select the folder that I want to put this in. And then down here, this is where I have the option to record my prompt over the telephone. Or again, if you have someone like Allison record this, she will email you a WAV file. You can just say upload, browse to where that's saved, upload that into the system and use that. And again, that keeps all your prompts consistent. And to record a sound, I just select an extension on the system. And then what will happen is it will actually ring the telephone. And I'm going to break my own rule here, just so hopefully you can hear this.
Your message after the tone. When done, hang up or press the pound key.
So at this point, I would just record my message. Thank you for calling Arizona Cardinals. You know, press 0 for the front office. You know, 1 for ticket sales, 2 for apparel. And then once I was done, I would actually hit the pound key so that it would end that call. And then once I do that, it's going to come back and say that I'm done, and then I can save the sound. So this is how you record your sounds in the Sound Manager that you can use. Another component that you might build is a time frame. So you name your time frame and you say create. And then here you select your time, your conditions. And then you've got options to select specific dates, or if it's like the day of the week, if we say this is business hours, we might say Monday through Friday. Might say, since it's NFL and they work on Sundays, we'll say Sunday through Friday, so that way you can buy your tickets, so it will be open. And then you select your time. You just punch in your time here and create that time frame. Now I have a time frame that I can call upon when I'm in my IVR. When I select the action that says time-based clause, I can actually come here and select that and use that, and based on what time it is, I can direct that call to whatever other IVR that's available. And then queues, we've talked about ticket sales and apparel. So an extension type that you might use in Switchvox in an IVR would be a queue extension. So my extension type, I say call queue. Give this an extension. Name it. Ticket sales. Now here I have different ringing strategies that I can choose from. I can do a ring all, I can do round robin, least called, fewest calls, and order random. So depending on how you want to set up your like call center type situation, you just select your ringing strategy, and that's the way it'll ring those phones. So we'll say round robin. And then when I want to add members to the queue, I have the option of adding groups or individual extensions. And then at the bottom, you'll see I've got permanent and login members. So if you're a permanent member, that means you're in the queue. There's still ways to pause, set your phone to do not disturb. So there are ways to set it so you're not taking calls if you're not there, not available. Or you can do the login and then actually have to call a login extension to log in and out of the extension. It's just reported different in Switchvox. So let's grab the team. We'll make one person permanent. The other thing about Switchvox too, you'll kind of notice just the tabs. All the way through Switchvox, we try to group like information together. So like right here, we're talking about queues and queue members. So everything has to do with that. So we've selected our members. Then we want to see how we want that call to be distributed to the members. So you can set the time. By default, it says 16 seconds, which is about 4 rings. You know, it might be that I want to set it a little bit higher. So I want to give the agents more time to try to call, receive that call. Wrap-up time, if you've got like a CRM package or a database where you need to enter information, the wrap-up time is this is set to 30 seconds, so they got 30 seconds to enter the information after the fact, and they will not receive another call until the 30 seconds has expired. And then we have things like acknowledge call or auto log off if they forget to log out, do things like that. Then the next tab is the caller's experience. What do they hear? Do they hear music on hold, or is it just ringing? A lot of people like to do music on hold. You can select the music group that that's pulled from. You can also announce position in the queue and estimated hold time. Now this section here, these are just sample sound prompts. Anywhere that you see a pull-down menu like this, it says you are next. We just came from the sound manager. There's a folder for each section of the box. Instead of saying you are next, you might want to give information about ticket sales or apparel, or if this was tech support and maybe you know there were some issues, it's a known issue, you might say, hey, we're experiencing some network issues. You know, it's been reported, thank you, you know, if it's something different, whatever. So anywhere there's a pull-down menu in Switchvox, you can play something different. So you're not tied to what's here. The next section was in-queue call routing. This is where you can redirect the calls. So again, a lot of you are probably Asterisk developers. Maybe you do both Switchvox and Asterisk. But someone who's not a developer, you can see how easy this is. It's basically fill in the blank. Like the first one, if the caller's been waiting in the queue for X number of seconds, where do they go? You don't have to know Asterisk. You don't have to know Linux. You don't have to be a developer. It's just fill in the blank. You know, hey, 300 seconds. So if they've been waiting for 5 minutes, where do we go? Maybe we send them to a receptionist or a lead or another queue that's a higher priority. And you can see there's other redirect scenarios here, like if no one's logged in, or if they zero out, or just the ringing strategy, you might want to link multiple queues together. And then this last section here where it says permissions, this is doing 2 things. First, you're giving permissions to the agents to see information. And in the queue extension, there's a lot of information there. So this is controlled by the admin. You may or may not want that agent to see some of the information because it's possible that they might, well, I'll just kind of go through the different levels here, but they could see information on another agent. You may or may not want that to happen. So here you can see, I'll just kind of look at these buttons here on the right-hand side. We've got 4 different levels here. The first one is my status. So if I gave someone my status, this allows me to see kind of some high-level stats like how many calls I've taken, my average talk time, things like that. If I go up 1 level, and anytime you go up, you get that plus whatever's below that. So in this case, I would get the overview, which is the team stats, how many calls we've taken, average talk time for the team, but I'd also get my status information as well. And then when I hit the detailed information, and you see each time I click on this little icon to the left changes. Pardon me. The detailed view, now it tells you who the agent is, whether they're logged in or logged out, how many calls they've taken. So you can actually get real specific information on the agent. So this might be more of a lead or manager type setting, because again, you may or may not want other people seeing what other agents are doing. And then another feature that we have in Switchvox, call control. So this is probably more for, you know, like a small call center that needs more control over the call. So what call control allows you to do is reprioritize. It might be somebody, that's lower in the queue, and it's like, ooh, I really need to talk to that person, or we need to help that person really, really quick. You can push a button and they bump all the way to the top. You can assign this. Maybe I want to say, hey, Frank's one of our agents, and I want to assign this to Frank and let Frank take that call. I can do that. Or you can answer the call. If you want to give them permissions to actually take the calls from the queue, you can do that as well. Without doing this, we've already set our ringing strategy, in this case, to be a round robin, so the call will just be distributed to the agents in a round robin fashion if you don't do anything. But again, the call control is something that allows you to have a little more control over the calls in the queue. So I mentioned it does two things. It is giving you permissions, or the agent permissions, to see this information in their switchboard, but it's also on our phones. We have phone apps on our Digium phones, and one of the apps is a queue app. So when you give permissions, you're also giving the person on that extension to actually go to this display, open up that app, and see some of that same information that I just talked about, which is really nice, because if you don't have your switchboard open, the call control panel, if you don't have that open, you can still see that information on your phone. Okay, so that's just some of the components that we talked about: extensions, time frames, sound prompts. So now let's actually dive in, and I want to show you just how to piece together an IVR in Switchvox. So again, I'm going to start from the bottom. So our first one was operator or front office. We might say calls extension 105. So we just named it, gave it a description. And then from here, I'm going to select an option. And again, this is where I need my flow chart, because again, we're building this backwards. It's not until the next IVR, the next level up, it's going to say press 0 to get to the operator. So that action and option is going to be taken care of at the next level. So here, in my mind, I'm looking at my flow chart. Okay, what happens when they hit 0? I need to call the operator. So this is just a very simple one action IVR where all I need to do is call the operator. Oops. Now some of this sounds like this. The way I build the IVRs, I build a lot of small IVRs and link those together, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Now granted, there's different ways. This is very, very flexible. You can build IVRs in different ways. Some people might build bigger, longer IVRs and then have entry points at different levels. I like to build them small and link them together, because my opinion is, if you have a really long IVR and you have issues, now I have to troubleshoot an IVR that's really, really long. The way I like to do it is, if I build small IVRs and I have an issue, I only have to troubleshoot that one piece. So again, it's a preference thing, but again, this is very flexible and allows you to build those the way you want it. So that's calling the operator. So now let's create another one. So another bullet was, we had a ticket sales office. Ticket sales. So on this one, I wanted to, when you press 1, again, that's at a higher level, I want to actually call the agents that are in the ticket group that are selling tickets. And I want to be able to prompt them, because I might have people that are selling tickets and jerseys. So I want to make sure that they can see the difference between the two. And I'm going to build these out of order, and I'm going to kind of show you how you can fix this, but why order is important. So I'm just going to kind of throw some actions in there. So the first thing is, I might want to call the queue extension for the ticket sales. So I can click on the button to see what that is. So we're going to call the ticket queue. But also I want to tip off the agent that it's tickets. So I want to alter the name to prepend to the name, again, tickets. So this way, and I like to prepend and keep it short, this way I can still maintain all the caller ID name and number information. You know, the system allows you to replace that if you want to, but I like to, again, see who's calling. And just in case I'm not paying attention to the display, I might also do a ring hint that allows me to ring my phone differently. So, oh, this is a different call. This has to do with tickets. So in this IVR, I have 3 different actions. Now, I usually tell people when you see green arrows, order matters. So right now, the way this is, the call comes in, it says dial extension 1500, the call's gone. It's not going to alter any of that information, so I just have to make sure that I have these in a proper order, so that way the call's not leaving the IVR before it does everything that it needs to do. So in this case, it comes in, it alters, and it prepends some information to the name. Then I'm setting a ring hint, so my phone rings differently. And then it's going to call that extension, which is where we have our agents with our round robin, it would ring the phones. So that's the ticket sales. Apparel would be the same way, but instead of tickets, I might set ring hint to apparel, or, well, I would do that, and then I would also call the extension that was being monitored by. Another thing that's pretty common in the IVR is people might want to dial by name directory. Now in Switchvox, there's a default extension. You can build your own if you don't want to use the one that's there, but there is by default an extension 411. You call it and it asks you to press the first 3 letters of the party's last name. So if I want an option to say dial by name directory, I'm just going to dial an extension. Again, this is similar to calling the front office, just dial an extension. So again, that sub-level is very, very basic. So I've built those 4 on the bottom. Now we want to go back and build our after hours and our daytime. So let's do the after hours. So in the after hours branch, I just play a sound, thank you for calling. Our normal business hours are 8 to 5. Please leave a message in our general mailbox. So there, just have a couple actions where I'm going to play a sound, the sound prompt, and I'm going to use Allison's prompt because it's going to be much better than what mine sounds like. So we got, again, this is why I like to have my folder, so I don't have all these hundreds of different sound prompts. You know, just list the ones that have been created for me. In this case, I don't want it to be interruptible because I'm going to send them to an after-hours mailbox, so there's no reason to allow them to branch out and go somewhere else. So they play the sound, and then I send them straight to voicemail. This way it doesn't ring the phone. If this is someone's phone, it's just going to go straight to voicemail. And that's our after-hours branch. So you can see I'm building small IVRs and I'm working my way backwards. Now this one, so now this would be IVR number 7, which I would call the open or during business hours branch. So we'll go back and we'll build that. Now here's where I start to incorporate options. So I do have my sound prompt, that I need to give the instructions to the caller to tell them to press 0 for the front office, 1 for ticket, 2 for apparel. Now this one I do want to make interruptible because they may have been here before, maybe they purchased tickets before or apparel before, and they don't want to wait. They just know they want to go to option either 1 or 2, so I do want to make that interruptible. So that's my sound prompt, but this is where my options come into play. So now my sound prompt says press 0 for front office, 1 for ticket, so now I have to say where do we go when someone does that. So here is where I modify the options. And before we saw one that already existed, but now we're going to go through. And this is why I tell people it's so important to build it from the bottom up. If you don't build it from the bottom up and you try to go down, if I started here and I get to this point and say press 1 to go to this IVR, well, it doesn't exist. So then I have to stop working on this IVR, go build the other one, and then come back. So to me, it's not a very useful, it's not a very efficient use of your time. And to me, it would drive me nuts to go back and forth, to kind of leapfrog back and forth to build this. And that's why I like to try to build all the components before I get here. So just to link everything together, I'm going to say 0 goes to the front office. Now here's, and I've mentioned this, the way I build mine, I can always go to the beginning, but this is an option. This last one here is if you did build one big IVR, this is how you could go into different entry points. But the way I build it, I just link them all together from the beginning. So that would be our front office, and this is where you can just move really quick as the system will let you go. We got our during business hours. You can see, just start selecting these as you go. We had our 9 to dial by name directory. And on some of these, I actually put the option number in the title just to make it easier for me to remember to check. And you might want to give them the option of, hey, sometimes you listen to the options, you're not sure, you forgot which one they were going to use. You might hit the star key to replay this again. So it might loop all the way back around to the business hours. So hit star to hear these options again. So that gives them an option to hear those. So again, you're in full control, and this is very, very flexible. I tell people, as far as call routing goes in Switchvox, I can pretty much route the call any way you want that, because it's very flexible. And then we saw this before. Again, I might allow someone to call the extensions, and then the other ones I would leave the way they are. So now we're to the last level. So this is where I might call this my main IVR. Let's see what it. Doesn't like symbols. So my main IVR, at the top of my flowchart, this is where I was going to check variables, and I was going to check the time of day. Now, I didn't open up the variables, but I will show you kind of what that looks like. And what I would do in a case like this, where it was a manual override, I would actually build a separate IVR just for toggling of that variable, because you don't want someone to say, "Ooh, look, we got in. Let's open and close their PBX." So you can lock that down where only maybe 1 or 2 people can call that extension, and that's actually done somewhere else. So I would do that somewhere else, And that's why we have the global variables, so you can set global variables and then get those in another place. So in this one, I would say get global variable to start, because we've already done this somewhere else. So I'm going to retrieve the day-night mode variable, and I'm going to set that to this value. So whatever this value is at the bottom, the global variable, I'm going to set this new variable, var local day-night mode. So I'm going to get that variable, then I'm going to make a decision on what to do with this. So this is where I go to my conditional clause, and I can say if the variable is equal to 0, which is our closed, we can say go to the after hours menu. And then I might have another one. If it's equal to 1, let's go to the during business hours. So this is how I can branch off and have my manual override. And then my time-based clause, so I would probably keep that in the 1 position, just so we're normally open. I want to only use that in the manual override. I would select my Arizona Cardinal business hours, and then I would go to my let's see, yeah, business hours were open, so I want to go to the during business hours IVR. So that's how I've worked my way all the way back to the top. Now the last thing that I would do here is I would actually go to Setup and Manage Extensions, back to the section where we actually created the queue extension. And this is where I would select Create Extension. And then I went through this kind of fast last time, but you can see there's a lot of different extension types. Earlier we selected the call queue that's here, but now what I want to do is I have my IVR. How do I access that? Or how does someone from the outside world get to this IVR? So I want to assign it an extension. And I would say go to my main IVR. So now I can use this extension to call it, or direct calls there from either a SIP trunk, PRI, or analog. Switchvox does support all 3. If you're doing just regular VoIP using SIP, you're ready to go right out of the box. If you are doing traditional telephony like PRI or analog, we have expansion slots and cards, and you might be familiar with that on the Astra side. That's kind of how we got started, was making telephony cards for servers for Asterisk. So we still make all those different form factors. And I'll just kind of show you real quick under like VoIP providers here, where I have a SIP trunk and I have it directed to extension 1700. So if you call that, then all the calls are going to that extension that we just created. So now we'll take a look. So here, when you view the chart, you can see where we have our main IVR, and you can see to the left-hand side the IVR menu tree. So this is why I still like to make small IVRs and link them together. The system's going to piece those together and give me a larger IVR tree anyway. So even if I take it down a level and I go to my during business hours, let's see here. There we go. Now my demonstration, I kind of hopped around. I just kind of did samples, but I did pre-make one so everything's there together. So you can see on the left-hand side, even though I'm in just the business hour IVR, you can see it gives me all the options that I chose. So as I start to link these, 0 goes to the front office, ticket sales, and you can see here that it shows where I altered the caller ID, I set the ring hint, and these are all links. So if I were having an issue with ticket sales, I can click on ticket sales and go straight to that IVR and look at those actions. Maybe there was something wrong with the way I did alter caller ID. I can actually select that and it takes me all the way to action. So this menu on the left-hand side allows me to go all the way to that IVR. So you can see how it builds that all together when I had just a handful of small IVRs. Okay, let's see here. I actually have a DID if you want to call in. We'll kind of test this out. Let's see. Let me plug up the... So if somebody else wants to call into the menu, you're more than welcome. We'll actually take a look at that. But here, if I call in, maybe.
Thank you for calling the Arizona Cardinals organization. If you know your party's extension, please dial it at any time. Press 0 for the front office, 1 for ticket sales, 2 to order apparel, 3 to check account information, and 9 for a dial ID directory. If you need to hear these options again, press the star key.
So if I want ticket sales, I would press 1. And it should drop me into the queue. And then you can see over here, it's going to go through and hang up on me. But once I'm in the queue, it should start to go through these phones, and I can select the phone option from there, pick it up, and have the agents. So that's how you build an IVR in Switchvox and piece that together. Like I said, you're more than welcome to call that DID if you want to play with that. Let's see. Do you have any questions? So I'm trying to think. So do you have any questions on Switchvox, the IVRs, how I built this?
Is this interface responsive?
What do you mean responsive?
Can I use my mobile phone to configure this IVR?
No. It's the display, the GUI was more or less designed for the browsers. I think everything would be skewed. So I don't know that it'd be big enough to allow you to do that. Sure.
So this was a DTMF example. Does it have speech recognition?
That right now would be separate. This is just DTMF only. So if you needed to do voice recognition, you would have to have a separate server to detect the speech and then route the call back to Switchvox to allow it to route the call. So right now, that is something that might be on the future roadmap, kind of way out in the future, but that is something that engineering is thinking about. But today, it would require a separate server.
So separate server means the speech solution server, or what does it mean by separate server?
Well, just something with your voice recognition software. So if you were going to build you an Astra server with voice recognition, so when I say separate, Switchvox today, you can either get it as an appliance, but you could not put that same voice recognition on the appliance itself. So it's kind of a free, just think of it as an appliance. It's freestanding. It's the only thing it houses is the software for Switchvox. So any kind of voice recognition would have to be something separate, and then you would just have a SIP connection between the two, and then route calls back and forth based on whatever recognition or routing that you had in the Asterisk box.
So it needs to transfer the call really. It is
No, it would actually, wherever the call is at that moment, so it would have to pass it back to Switchvox. And then if you wanted to give them more options for voice recognition, we'd have to pass it back too. So right now, the call goes back and forth between the voice recognition server and Switchvox.
Because normal, like if you go with nuance engine, so they just need RTP stream basically, so that, or maybe any way you can record the stream, give it to them. They really don't need a control of the call. So we're just trying to see that is there any way to integrate nuance with the switch notification capability?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, you can record the prompts. It's just the detection of the voice that action is going to reside in the other server. But I mean, you could send it back, but you'd have to direct it to the right place. So if you wanted the prompts in Switchvox, if that's what you're asking, yes, you could direct it back to Switchvox, but you'd have to direct it to the right place and play that prompt at that time. Because we have the sound manager and you can select those. Any other questions on, again, IVR, how I built this, other actions?
I do see some reporting options there. Are you going to cover separately the reporting options?
Reporting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real-time reporting, I can see that which calls are in progress and all that information.
Well, this would be creating a report after the fact. And actually I don't know who's coming to the next session, so I don't want to steal too much thunder if you're actually coming back. But there is a call control panel that actually is the real-time data that shows you when a call comes in. You can see as far as the agents, you can see who's logged in, who's taking calls. You can see who they're talking to and how long they've talked. And then you can see things like missed calls, abandoned calls, completed calls. So you get that information. So there is a way to see that, but it's not through reporting. It's actually through, well, I mean, you get the information through reporting, but it runs a report. It's after the fact. But real-time data would either be through the Q app on the phone or the Q panel in the switchboard. But I've done a lot of these, and the flowchart is the best tip that I can give you. It may not, it may not sound like much, but when you go to build this, you really need that step-by-step to show you how to get that. Has anybody in here built IVRs in Switchvox before? How many did it take you? A couple to get the feel of it?
I have a lot of ideas. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Once you get the hang of it, it's not command line. It's, yes.
Are there reporting options specifically for the IVRs? Let's say, like the number of calls that like hit option 1 or like option 2 or that sort of stuff?
I can't get that granular. I can tell you how many calls the IVR took, but I cannot tell you that I can't say that, oh, we've got more apparel calls than ticket sales, so let's move that to the top. I can't select that. I can't report on options. That would be a nice feature. Any other questions? You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome to come play with the phones. If you have any side questions that don't have anything to do with IVRs and Switchvox, you're more than welcome to, just come up here and let me know. So I want to thank you for, again, coming to my presentation. And I think I have another talk at 11, I believe. I think it's 11. And thank you. I'll actually do a switchboard demonstration. That'll be more of the kind of the question that you asked. So in case someone's coming back, I didn't want to steal any thunder from that. But again, thank you for coming. I hope you all have a great show. And feel free to play. These are actually hooked up with a SIP trunk. So if you need to call a friend, phone home, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yay.